Hey everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan. Coming up on this week's episode, Microsoft announces new integrations and partners for App Attach. Also, Apple acquires a popular image editing app. And a ransomware attack may play a part in the tragic case of a missing child. For this and more, keep listening to this episode of the podcast, which of course, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. And that includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops. And of course, also brought to you by Master Packager, who make an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. Last Friday, Okta posted an odd update to its security advisories. The advisory states that on October 30th, 2024, a vulnerability was internally identified in generating the cache key for AD-LDAP del auth. The bcrypt algorithm was used to generate the cache key where they hash a combined string of user ID plus username plus password. During specific conditions, this could allow users to authenticate by only providing the username with the stored cache key of a previous successful authentication. They say that a precondition for this vulnerability is that the username must be or exceed 52 characters anytime a cache key is generated for the user. The vulnerability can be exploited if the agent is down and cannot be reached, or there is high traffic. This will result in the del auth hitting the cache first. So essentially, if it's in a state where it's going to use this del auth because, again, the agent is down, or perhaps there's high traffic, if a username exceeded 52 characters, no password would be required. So passwordless authentication is possible, which is probably as bad as it gets. It is believed this vulnerability has existed since an update was made by Okta back in July, so specifically July 23rd. The issue has been resolved by switching the algorithm from bcrypt to BPKDF2 after this vulnerability was internally identified. And I saw some on social media, on Blue Sky, suggesting that this could actually be a vulnerability that is common when using this bcrypt algorithm. So if you have other products using bcrypt, you should probably be a little skeptical. Last Friday, Microsoft announced that Liquidware, Numescent, and Omnissa are launch partners with Microsoft, integrating their application delivery solutions with App Attach in Azure Virtual Desktop. Microsoft said that integrating the solution with 3 of the top application delivery providers will offer substantial benefits to administrators in organizations of all sizes. Additionally, the App Attach in Azure Virtual Desktop API is now publicly available, allowing providers to take advantage of this integration for enhanced application delivery. So essentially, if you're an Azure Virtual Desktop customer, you can now natively integrate other application management solutions with Azure Virtual Desktop using the App Attach feature. So for example, my employer and show sponsor, Numescent, is one of those partners for the launch, and we are integrating Numescent Cloud Pager, which is the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops, as you hear at the top of each show. But with Cloud Pager and Numescent's Cloud Paging application container specifically, you're able to tackle things like legacy applications. For Azure Virtual Desktop, you can eliminate the need for image management, possibly even just rolling with a provided image in the Microsoft Compute Gallery. You can reduce the number of host pools and just reduce the number of resources that you're consuming in Azure in order to support your Azure Virtual Desktops and manage those applications. And application management with Cloud Pager and App Attach is pretty simple, and application delivery is performant. And I'll share links so you can check out more on this announcement and this integration. And you can find that over at 5bytespodcast.com for this episode, which is episode 359. So I've been reporting on this monthly for the last few months, but according to recent data from StatCounter that was shared by TechSpot.com, Windows 11 has reached a market share of 35.55% in October. This is an increase of 2.13 percentage points from the previous month. So it seems like growth and adoption of Windows 11 is picking up speed, albeit still a little bit slow when you consider the fact that Windows 10 end of support is coming up in less than a year. And staying in that wheelhouse in terms of topics, Microsoft has announced that end users will only be able to buy a single year of extended security updates for their Windows 10 PCs, and it'll be priced at $30 per PC. The company confirmed that the second and third years of security updates will be exclusive to business and schools only. Microsoft says consumers will be able to enroll in the Windows 10 Extended Security Update program closer to the end of support in 2025. According to Ars Technica, Microsoft did say that Microsoft Defender antivirus in Windows 10 will continue to get new definition updates through at least October 2028. Presumably, that's because there's that commitment to support those customers using the extended security updates for up to 3 years. But obviously, for actual home users, you're going to want to be on Windows 11, ideally in less than a year, so you don't have to pay that $30 or risk going without security updates. But worst case scenario, if your hardware, for example, just will not support Windows 11, paying this $30 will keep you secure, whilst perhaps you can save up and buy a Windows 11 compatible device. Recently, there were reports on Twitter that Microsoft enabled the ability for every user in every organization to get a trial license for Microsoft 365 CoPilot without an administrator's help by default. This includes building their own custom agents with CoPilot. To turn this off, you can go to Admin, Self-Service Purchase, and Do Not Allow, according to GetWired on Twitter. So that seems like a pretty big whoopsie and is likely something that has already been fixed by the time you're listening to this episode. Microsoft has announced a public preview of smart card redirection support for Yubikeys in the Windows app on iOS version 11.0.4. Customers using the Windows app can connect their Yubikey to their Apple iPhone or iPad and use it within the virtual Windows sessions to stay secure and productive. The Yubikeys integration supports the latest Yubikey 5 portfolio. The much maligned Windows recall feature that I've covered at length on this podcast in recent months has reportedly been delayed again, with Microsoft stating, quote, "To ensure we deliver on these important updates, we're taking additional time to refine the experience before previewing it with Windows insiders. Originally planned for October, Recall will now be available for preview with Windows insiders on CoPilot Plus PCs by December," end quote. And I saw a separate article, and I was going to cover it as a separate story, but an article suggesting that the launch of the CoPilot Plus PCs has been a disaster, and mostly because this Windows Recall feature that was built up as the main feature announced in terms of AI capabilities for those Windows CoPilot Plus PCs has been delayed and was also met with much controversy. And if you haven't listened to the previous episode of the podcast and don't know what the Windows Recall is, it's essentially kind of like taking snapshots of all the activity and all the data on your actual Windows desktop, and it makes it available kind of in a timeline view. And then you're able to use AI with the natural language to do a whole lot of things with everything that's available on your PC. So essentially making a supercharged AI Windows PC. But unfortunately, this feature now seems like it won't see the light of day until December. And even in December, it's only going to be in preview. So yeah, definitely a setback for the CoPilot Plus PCs and just the AI initiatives by Microsoft in general. Microsoft warned customers they may experience up to 30 minutes of black screens when logging into Azure Virtual Desktop after installing the KB5040525 Windows 10 July 2024 preview update. Additional symptoms include single sign-on failures, blocking connections to backend services, or preventing data syncs, and Office apps losing network connectivity, while other apps like Edge retain access to the internet and the local network. This issue is caused by a deadlock in the interactions between the Azure Active Directory broker and the underlying AppX deployment service and background tasks infrastructure service. So luckily, according to bleepcomputer.com, the issue is specifically with this July preview update, and most enterprises will not be installing preview updates. So hopefully this is not affecting you. But if it is affecting you, now you know what's causing your problem, so perhaps you'll need to back out of that update. According to bleepycomputer.com, Microsoft is investigating a known issue that affects Microsoft 365 customers and causes classic Outlook to hang or freeze when copying text. These problems appear on systems running Outlook current channel version 2409, which is build 18025.20096 or higher, or when using languages within IME. When you select text in a classic Outlook email and then use the copy shortcut Control-C, Outlook may hang or freeze, and that has been confirmed by Microsoft. The Outlook team is investigating the issue and will provide more information when mitigation measures or a fix are available. But until a solution is found, Microsoft offers affected customers several temporary fixes to work around the issue. You can revert to a previous IME version using detailed instructions that are provided, and I'll share a link to that with this episode. And Microsoft also advises those impacted to revert Outlook to the previous build, which is not affected by this issue. Microsoft is also reportedly investigating a new Windows 11 issue that causes the Task Manager to say there are 0 running apps and background processes. It's caused by another preview update, this time for Windows 11 24H2, and it is KB 5044384. Microsoft says this known issue appears only to impact Windows systems where the group by type view is toggled on. Microsoft engineers are working on a fix that will be delivered with a future Windows update. In a tragic case in my home country of Ireland, there's a missing child named Kieran, and it's a really bizarre one. So he was reported missing only a few weeks ago, and then within a couple of days of the reports of him being missing, the Gardaí, which is our police force, moved to say that the investigation has been changed from a missing child to a missing child presumed dead. And they believe that he hadn't been missing just for a few days. He had actually been missing for up to 2 years. And it turns out that information held by TUSLA, which is kind of like our Child Protective Services, may have been lost during the HSE cyber attack back a couple of years ago that I covered on this podcast. TUSLA said the systems affected by the attack was not the system of record for case notes and was not relevant to the internal review by their agency into its interactions with Kieran's family. But the Irish Independent, who first reported on the data loss, quoted sources as saying that it was a matter of concern for the Gardaí. So if you look at it on the face of things, a child was presumably missing for 2 years, right? It was a child who was of age for going to school, and schools should be reporting absences, but that didn't seem to happen, or perhaps it did. Of course, also timeline-wise, it seems like Kieran stopped going to school right towards the end of the school year, well, around March, I believe. So perhaps the absence was excused away for the end of the school year, and then maybe they were told that he was enrolled in a different school, so the school didn't follow up. And then TUSLA, who really should have been following up and following through with this because they had interactions with the family and the child in the past, did not. And it's being suggested that perhaps a reason for this is because there was data lost during that cyber attack. During the recording of these podcast episodes, I've covered some pretty terrible things that have happened from cyber attacks, like notes from psychotherapy sessions that were hacked and then leaked online. Obviously, healthcare environments being breached and emergency rooms having to send patients to other hospitals with people losing their lives. And now this is another really bad one where the welfare of a child was essentially neglected by state agencies and those in charge of caring for children who are at risk. And it's been suggested that part of the reason is because there was a disconnect in the data because the breach happened around the time the child would have gone missing. Now, I'm a little bit skeptical to this. Not saying it didn't happen entirely, but as you may recall, the HSC actually received decryptors a few weeks after the breach, after the attack. So they could have been decrypting this data. Now, maybe the data was lost, or maybe there was so much data this was not prioritized to be decrypted, but then that raises other questions. So it'll be interesting to see how this unravels in the coming weeks. But it may not be something that is made public anytime soon because there's these laws around data protection in terms of children in particular. So hopefully something comes to light and it is shared because it is of the public interest, but we'll wait and see. In less somber news, OpenAI has launched their search engine capabilities, and it is for paid subscribers only at the moment, at least, with free enterprise and education users gaining access in the coming weeks. Rather than launching as a separate product, web search will be integrated into ChatGPT's existing interface. The feature determines when to tap into web results based on queries, though users can also manually trigger web searches. ChatGPT's web search integration, according to The Verge, finally closes a key competitive gap with rivals like Microsoft CoPilot and Google Gemini, which have long offered real-time internet access in their AI conversations. The underlying search model is a fine-tuned version of GPT 4.0, and prior to this update, ChatGPT's knowledge was limited to a cutoff between 2021 and 2023, depending on the model. Now, I am a subscribed user to ChatGPT, and I've been asking it some questions this week. And from what I can see, sometimes it still pulls data that's a few years old. Now, there are cases where it does seem to return more current information, like if I ask about a recent news story, it is able to bring information up about that. But in other scenarios, it seems to go to like TripAdvisor reviews and content that's 2 or 3 years old still. So it'll be interesting, I guess, as a user of the service to see if this is going to be something that is persistent. Perhaps it's just still defaulting to its normal search and then only using the web search if it gets stuck or if I ask him multiple times. Apple has acquired Pixelmator, a popular Photoshop alternative for Mac, iPad, and iPhone users. Pixelmator said, now we'll have the ability to reach an even wider audience and make an even bigger impact on the lives of creative people around the world. So this is interesting because in the past couple of years, Apple has also acquired some of the top applications in their respective categories, and this seems like another effort to buy perhaps a high-performing application in the image editing space. Seems like a pretty sound strategy, and hopefully this is going to provide great value to those Apple users. WhatsApp has announced an enhanced chat filter that allows you to create custom lists to categorize your chats to hopefully make it a little easier to digest the messages. According to TechCrunch.com, the feature started rolling out last week and should be available for all users in the coming weeks. To create a list, if you have the feature, tap the plus sign in the filter bar at the top of the Chats tab and give the list a name. You can then add anyone you want to the list, including both groups and one-on-one chats. As you add more lists, you'll be able to swipe on the screen to navigate through the filters. Additionally, you can edit a list by long pressing it and choosing to add or remove people or groups. And this may not seem enterprise related, although, I do have some interactions sometimes with people in the space on WhatsApp, and it is definitely a popular application. But it felt like an important feature to me because since I moved to Ireland, everyone uses WhatsApp. Every sports group, school classes, communities, everyone's using WhatsApp, and I just find it so noisy. It's basically like my non-work Slack or Teams. It's just unbelievable and overwhelming and just hard to keep up with. So any feature that might help me be able to consume WhatsApp a little easier is welcome. The Register featured recent studies by Resume Builder and My Perfect Resume that showed just how rampant the posting of ghost jobs is in the tech space. Ghost jobs are jobs being advertised when there's no actual position, essentially a fake job posting. Some ghost job posts are about collating a list of outside talent for future roles or making it appear like a company is growing when it isn't. The other justifications basically boil down to torturing employees into working harder, according to the Register. The studies showed 81% of recruiters admitted to posting ghost jobs, with 41% saying half or more of the jobs they post are straight up fake. Resume Builder similarly found by speaking to more than 1,000 hiring managers that 40% of companies posted fake jobs in the past year, and that 3 in 10 had active fake openings posted as of June when it published its report. So obviously this is disheartening because there are a lot of people who got let go recently due to the craziness in the tech space at the moment. But also, while it's disheartening, if you've been feeling rejected because you've been applying for a lot of jobs recently, perhaps this will be a little bit of solace and bolster your confidence a little bit more, because a lot of these jobs are not real. They're fake. And it's messed up that they're able to waste people's time like this. And the article by the Register does go on to suggest that this is something that regulators may need to step in and try to help with, because it is not good for anyone and it's such a waste of time. And to wrap up the news for this week, there was a pretty crazy story that got picked up by many mainstream media outlets. A former Disney employee who was their menu production manager, who helped create and maintain the different menus used at restaurants in the Disney theme parks, decided to get some payback for the company firing him. After he was fired, they did not remove his access to a third-party software that they used for generating the menus and applying fonts. To get his payback, he went in and changed the price of items and changed menu fonts to symbols instead of letters. He compromised 14 employee accounts, but it doesn't explain how, and he also pointed some QR codes to anti-Israeli sites. If you read the article about this on CBS, you will see that he was suspended and that they wouldn't tell him why he was suspended, and then after he asked, he was just terminated with no explanation. But before you begin feeling sorry for him, I have to tell you that this arsehole also went in and messed around with the allergen listings on the menus, removing warnings for people with peanut allergies. Authorities believe no customers were harmed, but the FBI are now involved, so it's looking like this fella's in big trouble. You know, messing with the well-being of people and possibly killing people is way too far. It's a step way too far. I can understand him feeling aggrieved by being fired and being suspended without being told why, but way too far. But now, this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. First up this week, the awesome Meryl Fernando shared a complete curated list of aka.ms short links that are super useful for techies. And I think this is something that I shared before, but he's been maintaining the list and there's more short links added to it. So if you haven't checked it out before, check it out now and I'll share a link with this episode. Also, Sophos shared comprehensive research results from the last 5 years of their investigations into attacks against Sophos firewalls by Chinese attackers. If nothing else, if you're not in the security space, I find it really fascinating. I'm not necessarily completely security focused. And if you are in the security space, it might be interesting to see, how they've done this and what their conclusions were. And finally, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella's annual letter to shareholders has been published on his LinkedIn. And I'll share a link to this episode for that if you'd like to check it out for yourself. Obviously, a lot of the letter is about AI and the change in technologies, and saying that, Microsoft's 50 years, part of their success is because they adapt and change as technology changes, and they go after those market spaces. But also, me being in the IT space and having worked as an IT pro myself, what I find these addresses interesting for is to see what is the Microsoft CEO talking about product-wise, and what is he not talking about product-wise, And there was a whole lot of end user computing stuff that didn't seem to get a mention at all. The CoPilot Plus PCs did get a mention in terms of Windows and devices. So there's that, but not a whole lot for the EUC space, unfortunately. But hey, that's it for this episode of the podcast. The audio has probably been a little off this week and last week, like I said on last week's episode of the podcast. It should be back to normal next week. I'm traveling again this week, but I should be home to my home office next week. Thanks for putting up with it, and thanks so much for listening.